All right.
Now, I also want to address a few things where you may not even have realized that you can actually use short descriptions in these scenarios, and I think most writers are familiar with the idea of adding a short description to a typical topic, but you may not have actually possibly even known about the fact that you can in fact add short descriptions to DITA maps. Yes, in fact you can. You can add, you can add. Basically, the way it works is that if you have the topic meta element used within your map structure, you can. One of the allowable elements within topic meta is short description. So that's where you can actually add it within a map. And what this actually does at output is that the map short description basically overrides what tends to appear at the topic level, but not at a peer level. And just to explain, so let's say you have a short description that appears that you've written to the map, and then you have a short description that appears within an individual topic. So at output for say an HTML page, the information that will appear on the individual web page that's directly from the map is the link information, and then the short description that comes from the map. But if someone then takes a look at, say, the relationship table, which is a peer level version of things, then that is where the short description at the topic level would then appear. So this can in fact be useful in those instances where you might actually want to have different short descriptions appearing with a given different contexts. So if we take a look at the next slide. So this one, I'm going to show an example displaying a map level short description. So you can just click on there we are. So in this case we have filbert flanges and grapple grommets. So this is what's actually been applied to the map, and this says a practical example demonstrating why filbert flanges will not mesh with your grapple grommets. Now let's have a look at the same topic short description when viewed at the topic level. So click on the next one, and notice that these two are different. So this is what would actually appear when you're actually looking at this from, say, a related link from a rel table. So in this case, it's providing slightly different information. It says a practical examination of filbert flange meshing behavior with a special focus on grapple grommets. And these two examples don't necessarily show how information can be disclosed specifically for these particular levels. This is really just to show the fact that this is essentially how it works. So essentially, the map level overrides the topic level short description when you're looking at things from, say, a typical like tree hierarchy. Here are all the main links that appear for the various topics. And notice that this would be essentially if you had a lot of links to different topics talking about filbert flanges and graph grommets, you would have essentially the same map level short description overriding all of the individual instances that come after this. Whereas if you're looking at this from a relationship table, you will get more, you'll get a different particular view on, perhaps a more, individual topic-based view as to how this topic is relevant to an individual user, and part of the reason, now you might think, look back at this and just like, well, wait a second, why would I want to have the map short description override all of my topic ones for, say, an initial view? And the idea is that if in fact what you're trying to display is the sort of the overarching idea as to why people might want to come to your topics, maybe having one sort of, one statement that covers a whole bunch of topics might be a good idea. But when people are actually looking for specific content on a, topic by topic basis, going left and right or going through a relationship table, then maybe having a slightly more information about that would be more helpful. So it's a way of possibly disclosing more information when and where it is needed. Now, I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to want to use this for all instances, but I'm really just trying to describe how, when, and why this works. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so another possible use, and this is when I started looking into this subject, again, this is something I was unaware of. So a short description can also be used within a map in order to associate a short description with a non-DITA object, such as, for example, a link to an external website, which otherwise would not have a short description. So this example, looking at example.com, provides the code that would essentially show, so here is, topic meta, and then after that nav title, the example.org website, and then look at that, we have a short description. The example.org website is used in examples and is used to illustrate things like link behavior. Hey, so this is far better than just having the topic ref with just the link and then just saying the topic.org website. It actually tells you information as to what it's about and why you might want to go there, which is not normally something that you can add. And again, this is a a specific per link example. So don't worry, this is not going to overwrite the short descriptions for any further topics that you might have underneath this in the hierarchy, because this one is specific to this particular topic ref. So in fact, I would say that of the more likely scenarios you might want to use a map-based short description, this is probably the one you want to have a look at. Okay, next slide, please. Now, the other thing that I think is as clear as mud is trying to understand how short descriptions actually can work with abstracts. Oh, wait a second, sorry, I'm going ahead of myself. Never mind, coming back. In terms of, do you actually want to add short descriptions to your map? So as I say, in many cases, the two-tiered approach for short descriptions is going to be overkill. So, really do not consider that you have to do this. This is definitely an optional thing for you to do. And we're really just sort of pointing out that, hey, did you know that you can actually use short descriptions as maps? And here are the scenarios in which you could use it, and here's how it works. It can, in fact, be useful to present a different information, finding context based on, where your readers are coming from, if they're coming from the map or topic level. Also, the other caveat with this that really needs to be pointed out is that not all processes will render short description information when added to a map. So, before you go, madly deploying this, say, hey, I want to try this out and try, to test it on all my maps, make sure that when you actually output this to the common output type that you're going to be working with, that they actually do appear as intended. And we've already outlined previously how and where the default behaviors for topic-based short descriptions, how and when they ought to appear. But again, test these things out. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Coming back to what I wanted to talk about in terms of short descriptions and abstract, and again, as I was saying, when I first started looking into this, I actually, I did not understand really how short descriptions and abstract really work together, and now I think I have a better handle on things. So basically, what is an abstract? An abstract is really designed to be presented as the initial content of a topic. It can incorporate. Now, this is sort of the clear as mud bit. It can incorporate 0, 1, or more short descriptions within it. So yes, you can have multiple short descriptions. That's kind of odd, isn't it? Okay. So the way this actually tends to work is that you write an abstract. An abstract tends to be a longer summary, so to speak, of what the information within a topic is. And the idea is that instead of having to create a new short description for the topic, you essentially take a sentence or two from this abstract, and then you wrap it in short description tags, and that then becomes displayed as a short description. Okay, next slide, please. So in this particular example, we have a short description which can be used as a map. Hang on, I'm just making sure I'm getting to the right slides. Yes, okay. So what we're seeing here is an actual code. We're looking at this wonderful product called the Twisted Junior. And you can see here an abstract, and it says, the Twisted Junior can be used to manipulate physical objects in the real world remotely. Twisted Junior can be used for easily removing the tops off jars and bottle caps. And then we have a short description. All of the most likely scenarios for using Twisted Junior are covered here, including a few you might never have thought of. And then we have a note, Twisted Junior is not required for flipping actions. For that type of functionality, please inquire about our Mr. Flip It product line. And then moves on to the actual body content. Twisted Junior comes in 3 colors, and I'm not even going to try to attempt to I have no idea how that's pronounced, so I'm going to leave it there. And then what you can see when output as a link preview for a topic, you get the title, which is about Twisted Junior, and then the link to it. And then what appears is, in fact, the short description, which says all of the most likely scenarios for using Twisted Junior are covered here, including a few you may never have thought of. So now, if we take a look at the next page, you can actually see that, if you then look at the content of the topic, hey, it actually includes the short description within it. So essentially, this is a way that, you can essentially, instead of having to rewrite content that may already exist within a summary of the content for a particular topic, you just write it as an abstract and then wrap the short description tags around the sentence or sentences that you think most adequately summarize things from a short description standpoint. So you can actually see here, that the second paragraph is in fact the same thing that's actually being used as the short description in this case. Okay, next slide, please. So according to the DITA specification, abstract can hold multiple instances of short description. But how this can actually work at output in terms of which short description is displayed depends entirely on the setup of your own output generator and output type. In practice, when I was using some of the more standard tools that are out there, all I could ever come up with was, in fact, the very first instances. So I'm not sure what the behavior is for, telling it to come up with, say, a second instance of a short description. But so, again, really, it's hard to emphasize this enough. Kind of the same with the previous set of examples. Test this out prior to implementing it. So it's there now. And you now have a better idea as to how this can be used in context. But as I say, make sure that it actually works as intended for the output type that you use. All right, next slide, please. This is something that I echoed over Joe earlier, saying, this is bad. Don't. While normal processing forbids cross-references from being used in a short description, it can be done via a hack. And I'd actually heard that perhaps this was something that was allowable in the DITA 1.3 spec. I had a quick look at that, and it seems like that is not something that, at least if it is, it's not obvious that it can be done. But as I say here, resist the temptation, because, this is, okay, why? Well, because bad. But no. Putting a cross-reference in a short description takes the reader away from the very topic that it's supposed to introduce. And this pretty much goes against the whole idea of DITA best practices. You don't want to, point out to somebody, maybe the idea is that you're trying to point them to, say, a glossary entry for a term. But if you're going to do that within the body content of the topic, rather than within the short description, because it's definitely going to be going to lead people away from the individual topic that you're trying to direct them to. So leave things like trying to define terms. Leave that for the body content of the actual topic. Okay, next slide, please. Now, the other thing that you might also want to think about is looking at things like quality control. for short descriptions. So one of the ways that you can do this is that, if your CCMS supports this, or if you have access to a good text searching tool like, say, grep for Linux, or WinGrep, the equivalent for Windows, you can actually just do, very, very simply do a check to see how many of your topics actually have empty short description tags with them. So, in other words, you have short des, but with the with no actual content, and having the n/. So, looking for short des which is open, which has content, versus that which is closed. And here's an actual example I did with permission from looking over IXIASOFT's documentation set over 2015, looking at all of the new topics that have been created for documentation over that year, and I saw that, hey, it's a pretty good rate. It's a 91% of all of our topics have short descriptions. This is a definite thumbs up. This is a really good thing. But it's hard to ignore that, that little orange pie slice there. And when I showed this to the team lead for the Tech Docs department, she saw this, and she took this as feedback. And what she's told me, that the next time I do this for the documentation set for 2016, so when we get to 2017, I can do the analysis. She's promised me that that pie slice should, if not shrink away to nothing, it should get a lot smaller. So this is good feedback. And again, there's really, if you're using a good CCMS, it should allow you to do this type of search. And if you're not using a CCMS, use something like a text searching tool that will allow you to, go through the individual topics within whatever you're using as a repository, and be able to extract from that which topics are using short descriptions. Even if they're not good ones, at least they're there, as opposed to those which don't have any at all. Okay, next slide, please. Another way that you can also look at doing some quality control is consider, implementing a schematron rule to ensure that short descriptions meet a predetermined character count threshold. So this is actually a very basic schematron thing which would do exactly that. So you can actually see, the pattern that you're trying to match is looking at restricting the words, and that there is in fact a description, and then this is then applied to the parent element, which is specifically the short description element, and that there has to be a minimum of 3 words, and in this case it's trying to say that you shouldn't have more than 50. So as the writer is writing, it will, when this is implemented using schematron, this is not all you have to do. You actually have to add, I believe, a processing routine to make this come up within the editor. But the idea is that once you add these types of add this type of information, as the writer is adding content, it will flag automatically a warning sign saying, hey, you either need to add more words, or you might want to think about reducing the number of words for this particular short description. This does not ensure that this is going to be necessarily a good short description, but it does ensure that at least it's going to meet a minimum size length in terms of word count, and and ditto for maximum. And if you want more information, I really highly recommend taking a look at this particular link in the Oxygen documentation set. They actually have some really cool stuff on schematron rules. I mean, this is just one example from many. I believe on their own website they have a really nice tutorial about using schematron within their tool. It's really terrific. It's the bee's knees. By all means, take a look at it, and it's not just for just things like short descriptions, but for other elements that can be really handy in terms of prompting your writers to write their content better. And with that, I'll go over. I believe I now hand it. Oh no, sorry. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Next slide, please. Getting ahead of myself. All right. So, sort of my final parting words on this are, a couple of ways you might want to think about how to actually approach writing short descriptions for a given topic. So, I think of it, there's really sort of 2 basic approaches. One is that you do it as the very first thing you do. You create a topic, you know what the topic type is, and then, you then create the short description so that it's basically a thesis statement saying what the content in the topic ought to be. This is useful for people like, say, information architects to indicate to the technical writer or the subject matter expert what content ought to actually go into the topic in the first place. The other way of looking at this is to write this as the very last thing that you do, because then it really comes across as then a summary of what actually went into the topic. And the nice thing about this is that when another way, when it's done this way is that, if you're the writer writing the topic from scratch, and this is now the last thing you have to do before you send this off to the next stage in the workflow, you actually, once you've written the short description, you can actually, sort of, it's like, does that really convey all the things I wanted to convey in this particular topic? And, it really brings across a more critical eye to what's actually gone into the body content of the topic in some cases. So it's like, in the short description it summarizes this point and this point, but I realize I didn't actually talk about this point, and I need to go back to my topic and maybe write a little bit more just to fill in that particular gap. Or perhaps that's a tip for writing perhaps a whole brand new topic on something that you hadn't actually thought of that needed to be covered before. And and just in essence, from an editorial perspective, a short description really ought to capture, what the basics of a topic is, minus its detail. And now we're going to go for one more poll.
Right. All right, so we've got our last poll here, which is, after viewing this presentation, do you have a better idea of how to write short descriptions? And we got about 50%. Okay, we've got
3/4.
Yeah. So it looks like around 64% feel they know better. They can write better. 21% not so.
Let's put the results up. I think we have 80% now, so that's
yeah.
There we go.
And
oops.
I just wanted to interject. The poll question was, do you believe you are using short descriptions correctly? But Joe said, after this presentation, would you be able to use short descriptions better? So I'm not sure how people really answered the poll based on what was written or what Joe said. So
the results are interesting no matter how you look at it, though, because
right.
There is a majority out there who thinks that they are using them correctly, or perhaps now they know they have a better handle on how to write them. But it's interesting to see the not unsubstantial numbers who are saying no, no, we're not doing this right, or I don't know, I'm still not sure. Maybe. So I kind of wonder about the unsures in particular. I'm curious to know if maybe there's some good questions there relating to some of the other specifics relating to this. So hey, let's open this up and get the questions rolling.
Okay, well, I wanted to first start with a real quick plug because, Keith, you mentioned that Oxygen has a great link for doing schematrons, but also I wanted to say that CIDM Comtech online class for optimizing the DITA authoring experience has a whole lesson on schematrons.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, that's
yeah,
cool.
We've got some great things in that class. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, go to the Oxygen if you want a little bit more help.
Schematron is your friend, yes.
Yes, Schematron's our friend at that workshop. But that being said, I also wanted to make a couple comments that the people put in here, and the first one kind of makes me laugh, and they said, somewhere in there, Joe made a comment, if your topic does indeed define everything you need in the title, then you said omit a short description. And the person goes back and said, how dare you? I thought that was pretty good. But there are some questions here. I'm kind of backing up to the very beginning. You and Schematrons can help with this, but they made a comment about in a preview paragraph for child links is one of the main reasons we use short descriptions. And then they say, I know the DITA spec suggests that you maintain a small number of words, like 40 to 50 words, but for some more technical topics, that feels a bit short. We average 100 to 150. And then they wanted to know, would the DITA police ticket me for not adhering to the letter of the law, or let me pass since I'm
the DITA police, there is no such thing, by the way. And I'm looking
just
behind me. I don't
police.
see any flashing lights behind me, so I think we're good. But there's another perspective which we talked about in this talk, is that from an SEO perspective, the search engines will automatically truncate the results. So now this won't matter if you need to provide a lengthy / descriptive short description that adequately describes what's going on in a topic, and you're looking at this information from within, say, your own output where this information is available. But again, from an SEO perspective, if this is going out as HTML pages, which can be searched, and that's two big ifs. Not all not all organizations will be outputting their content either to HTML, or if they do, will necessarily want to have it searched by search engines. If they're using, say, something like, say, a federated search engine where people just come to one area within the company's own TechDocs website, so that they can then search within the TechDocs material themselves, and then you may not actually care so much about the Google SEO perspective. But if you do, then having a lengthier short description is going to be counterproductive, in the sense that if the most important portion of what you want to convey is at sort of the concluding portion of your lengthy short description, that's going to be dropped by Google. So again, you can have that information there, but put that use the inverted pyramid style. Make sure you have the most important information first in the short description. And again, strictly speaking, talking about SEO perspective. Otherwise, yeah, great. Have go nuts. Have a lengthy have long descriptions for your content. Anything else? Anything you want to add?
No, sir. You got it.
Okay, cool.
There was a couple comments about, what that maximum really is with Google, because they're seeing sometimes they get up to 223 words. So it may get truncated. Maybe that's the base.
Yeah. That's why I deliberately put in the sort of like the roughly figure there, because Google will automatically parse things, and it will. It is definitely variable, and I believe it's like the variation is on sort of like roughly 20 characters on either side of the figure that I gave. I think it was like 150. How many characters? I can't remember offhand. It's in the presentation. Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, but related to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's just minor, but the more important question is because of the SEO implications, should you approach short descriptions differently for web output than print? Style it differently so it looks like a byline of an article, write it as fragments in a web, but complete sentences in print, etc. How much should you architect toward output with the content of the element?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say that it depends entirely on where you get the most traffic. So, if, let's say, a scenario where we have two output types, where we have HTML as one and PDF as another. So for the HTML, yes, you definitely want to, the formatting, so to speak, in the HTML is going to be beyond what actually comes up for you, because, in the end, we're looking at an SEO perspective. It's going to be how Google display it, and Google will display your short description content in the way that Google wants to display it. So, they for the longest time, they've done things in the same manner, where they will have the link text followed by the full URL, then the title, and then the short description up to a certain character count. And so so that is liable to change. And in fact, the character count number that I came up with earlier was actually something that Google tweaked only within the past 3 months or so. It actually had been a shorter number, and they quite recently made this somewhat higher. So Google can and does change these sorts of things. But from a PDF perspective, yes, I would say that you definitely. I mean, personally, I like short descriptions, as you can probably tell. So I would say that you would definitely want to highlight the short description as being a distinct thing for the reader, so that when the reader looks at the short description content, they realize what that is. In other words, that is a short description that tells me more information about this particular topic, and make it in such a manner that it does in fact stand out on the page, but doesn't make it the be all and end all. So you have to. I wouldn't put it in in bright like a large font red text or something like that. You just make sure it's there. Make sure that people are aware of what it is, and that it is ultimately there, because the whole point of this is that it's kind of like it's like a way marker. It's a way to indicate to the user that, hey, there's some really good information here, and this is what this is about. And if it's not relevant to you, hey, there's enough information that tells you that this is not the topic you are looking for right now. So these are not the droids. This is not the topic you're looking for. So yeah, I hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, and I think you answered this other question that was related. It says, do DITA aware web help processor packages such as Suite Help, Fluid Topics, Oxygen, Web Help, etc., treat short descriptions differently than the full text search indexers like Google, Windows Search Services, Solar, etc.? And if so, how do you recommend we think about the short description content in both scenarios? And I think you just pretty much answered that one as well. I mean, if the same things apply.
Yeah, the same things apply. I guess the other thing to think about in that instance is kind of like what I was talking about with short description in abstracts and within maps is, examine how they're actually being output by your dynamic publication engine, and look at ways of possibly tweaking the results to match. And keep in mind, there's two sides of that. One is that you make sure that you write things adequately enough so that that the short descriptions appear within the dynamic publishing engine, and then realizing, kind of like with the previous question, you want to make them visually distinct. So that can just be italics, that can be maybe a slightly different font. However, but again, you want to make it distinctive enough so that the reader, upon reading, a couple instances, is like, okay, that's the short description. This tells me what's going to happen and what I can find out more about when I click on this topic.
Joe, do you want to add anything on that? You're good.
I'm good.
Okay, here's a different, this one's a little bit more technical. It says, what do you recommend in terms of content reuse within the short description? Can you extend reuse tools such as conditional processing, content indirect referencing within the short description? Could you key in a short description if a topic is used in two different contexts?
Ooh, ow! It kind of
I
hurts my
saved that
head.
one for last. There's a couple more, but they're lighter.
Well, do you want to tackle that one, Joe?
I know.
Okay.
Well, here's another one that just
Thanks,
came
everybody,
in.
and thanks for coming to the webinar today. Well, okay. Being serious about this, I think you need to be very careful about using short descriptions in a reuse context. Now, it makes sense to use things like keys within short descriptions if they're things like, say, product names. I really don't think it's a great idea to think about having sort of like canned short descriptions which you can access via a key, because that then suggests that you're going to have lots of topics that have the same short description. That would then be problematic, not only from an SEO perspective, but from say from the perspective of the reader, because they're going to encounter eventually topics that have the same short description, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, I'm confused. And the one thing you don't want to do is to confuse your user. If the idea is that you have multiple keys, like one per sentence, and you can sort of mix and match, I guess that makes it slightly better, but I can't help but thinking that maybe this is being over-engineered. If we're then looking at the idea of, say, con-refing individual short descriptions for, say, information that could then be used within the body of another topic, same thing applies. I think you're just going to be I think you're over-engineering it. Right. So, I guess my short answer to this is no.
Well, then that may be the answer to this one. It says, can multiple short descriptions be used and then have conditions applied? And I mean, that's related. I think those two can.
Yeah, that's related. And again, I think that comes with the idea that, if in fact you're using, if you're using a different, so, for the Acme bear trap, I mean, what if there is a different, like a more specific roadrunner trap or a coyote trap? Yes, you can certainly have keys that can bring up different terms and perhaps, run across slightly different scenarios that might be described specific to those particular traps for those particular scenarios. That actually does make sense within a filtering context. But again, as always with things like filtering, make sure that this is well documented, that you understand the implications of when you do this incorrectly. And one of the worst things, of course, if filtering is done incorrectly, you then get, for more information on the Acme bear trap / coyote trap / roadrunner trap, and then all the scenarios that follow. So you need to be, again, you just need to be careful. It makes sense in this case. I would say my answer to this would be maybe. Maybe the yes.
Keith, I've actually used it in short descriptions when we were creating documentation that was geared towards different platforms. So we might have a topic that explained how to do something in Windows and how to do something in Unix, and we would mention the platform in the short description. In some cases, we had this described how to do in Windows and Unix. We described both ways to do it, and then there were some parts of the documentation, some users that only wanted Windows, so we filtered it out the Unix, and vice versa.
That makes sense. Yeah, and that's probably that's a better example than the one that I came up with, and I think people will probably grasp that more. But again, the same thing applies. You want to make sure test these things out. Again, one of the real sort of bugbears with filtering is to make sure that you've captured everything, and that when you do output, that it actually captures everything that you want. So you want to make sure that you review the output results at the end. But that applies to any filtering operation, not just related to short descriptions.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I realize there are a couple more easier questions too. I didn't just save that one for the hard, but there's a couple more. Just a few more, and then a lot of good comments that I'll pass on. But the couple more questions here is, you mentioned why should I care for concepts, that's an important aspect. Any reason why you shouldn't do that for all types of topics?
Well, I think the reason we put it in concepts is that often concepts have a kind of a nebulous topic title. It might say something about low-level latency, and you think, well, I don't care about low-level latency, but you would, if you aren't familiar with the term or the concept, the short description would explain to you why you should care about low-level latency. Whereas in tasks and reference, you certainly should explain why they care, but I think that the task topic title itself will help you to understand why you should care. Does that make sense?
Keith, anything to add, or are you good?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Joe got that nicely.
All right. So another one on this whole SEO concept is: do search engines other than Google have different character limits? Any other big differences?
I'll be honest and say that I didn't investigate that thoroughly. I know that the likes of, say, Yahoo and Bing certainly do things slightly differently. So I don't know the specifics of the character limits. But part of the reason why I like to focus on Google is that it is far and away the most popular search engine out there. It essentially equates to something like over 80% or more of all search results that are done on the web. And the other thing is that Google has actually been really open about how and what they do. And again, I want to put a plug there for Google Webmasters. Not only their website, which really nicely describes exactly what it is that Google is looking for and how and why they work, which is one of the ways that it really helps not just technical authors but people writing for the web in general as to what the search engine is looking for. They also have really nice Webmaster Gatherings. I think they run every week or every couple of weeks, where people can sort of join into a conversation on I think it's on YouTube, and people can just throw them questions. And so if you wanted to find out more information about short description truncation rules, for example, you can actually go to a Google Webmaster meeting and virtually and ask them that question yourself. And sorry, no, I don't know the specifics when it comes to Google and sorry, when it comes to Bing and to Yahoo. I know they're different. I suspect they're not that different, and in many ways, Google is really the be-all and end-all for search engines. So, I would say optimize for Google first, and then Yahoo and Bing second, third, or 25th, or however you want to put it.
Okay, the rest are just comments, unless people type in a couple more questions. But we are really just over the time here. But if you had a couple more questions, I think Keith and Joe can stick around. So enter them now. Otherwise, I'm going to start wrapping up on some of the comments. We had a comment that was awesome demo of Abstract, and then they said thank you with lots of exclamation points. So they like that one. We also had one that said excellent information, thanks for sharing. Ones that have been very helpful with explanations, so a lot of good comments. Great webinars coming in, so a perfect topic. I think this is great. Hopefully everybody got some new insight into how to use short topics, and the next time we do a survey that we say, are you using short descriptions correctly, maybe we'll get 100% saying yes on that one. So I think
we should also mention that we have that Joe and I co-authored a white paper on this, which is available from the DITA adoption group, and there's a link for it right there.
We totally forgot. It's also in the handouts.
That's
you
right.
You can grab it directly from the handouts. Yeah, I totally
Before you go, grab the handout, because that's a copy of the white paper. It goes over much of the detail that we talk about in this presentation. So it's a nice and easy way to grab a copy for yourself while you can.
Yep.
Also, feel free to email either of us if you have any further questions. We'd be happy to talk with you.
And as a reminder, we will have the recording typically within a week. We'll send out an email that will come from Lavanya Thomas, I believe. So you'll get that recording. And again, great presentation. And someone was asking handout ? It's in the GoToWebinar control panel. There is